Hello everyone, and welcome to Politically Incorrect. I'm your host, Eddie Shee, and this week we want to talk to you about something you've been hearing a lot about, but might not necessarily know a lot about: inequality amongst race and gender. Now, I know what you're thinking. These topics are a little on the heavier side, and they may be a little uncomfortable to talk about, but they are undeniably important to discuss. So as we usually do here on Politically Incorrect, we're going to break this down for you piece by piece and give you the factual, statistical information you need to become an informed voter. So let's start with racial inequality in America. America's racial divide is almost older than our nation itself. It's an issue that in many ways has shaped our nation, and one that continues to shape it. It's an issue that single-handedly divides our country, and it divides our citizens. But what it is larger. In areas we have made progress to shared prosperity, and in areas we're torn as ever. Let's take a look at the numbers to find out just how torn we actually are. Perhaps the area that is most telling to a racial divide in our country is the racial divide along the lines of wealth. Over the past 25 years, the wealth gap between black and white Americans has nearly tripled. Today, the median household wealth for a white family is around $91,000, while the median household wealth for a black family is just $6,000. Now, that number is largely due to the fact that home ownership amongst black Americans is much lower than white Americans. On average, nearly 73% of white American families own a home, while only 43% of black families do. The numbers are just as staggering when it comes to poverty. America as a whole has 15% poverty rate, but that number masks the underlying racial differences. More than 1 in 4 black Americans live in poverty, while fewer than 1 in 10 whites do. The challenges that black Americans face are undeniably slanted. We could spend all day arguing why these statistics exist, but the simple fact is these statistics are not just the result of actions of our country's past. There's no denying that segregation and racism of the past have played a major role in shaping these issues of today. But as I mentioned earlier, these statistics have only gotten worse over the past 2 decades. Racial inequality is detrimental not only to the black communities across America, it's detrimental to the United States as a whole. About 1 in 6 Americans are black, and 1 in 6 Americans, when they're susceptible to this level of injustice, we can't stand by idly and expect this situation to solve itself. Now, the same can be said for gender inequality throughout the United States. Women make up an even larger percentage of this country than black Americans do. It should come as no surprise to you that 50% of Americans are female. Or simply put, that's exactly half of this entire nation. But when you look at the breakdown of things like wealth or workplace equality, women don't come close to accounting for 50%. In fact, in the last year, America was only ranked number 28th on the yearly list of the world's most equal countries for men and women, putting us behind countries like Rwanda, Germany, Iceland. Even worse, the United States came in at number 74 out of 145 for countries when you look at income equality. You see, income equality is one of those subjects that the United States seems to handle pretty poorly. As of right now, the pay gap in America sits at 21%, meaning that on average, women are only paid 79 cents for every dollar a man is paid. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but that means that by the time a college-educated woman turns 59, she will have lost almost $800,000 to her male counterparts, thanks to that gender wage gap. Now, these statistics are insane, especially when you take into account the fact that in almost every single state, the number of millennial women with or receiving a college degree is greater than the number of millennial men. Despite this fact, however, women are still 5% more likely to live in poverty. Race and gender are 2 things this country can no longer afford to ignore. Martin Luther King put it best when he said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The time to act is now, and you can do your part in a lot of different ways. You can go, vote, support politicians who favor equality. You can straight up support programs and initiatives that make it their mission to bring equality to everyone, Or you could do something as simple as speaking up when you see inequality happening. The important thing to remember is that inequality is not about somebody being superior or giving people special treatment for the sake of inclusion. It's all about allowing the same opportunities to every person, no matter the race, gender, or anything else. This is absolutely a solvable issue, and it's one that we need to get working on right now. Now, coming up after the break, we're going to be sitting down with politically incorrect correspondent Sam Predabon to talk about the 2016 presidential election and the candidates and their views on the topics that we just covered. This is going to be vital information for this upcoming election, so you're going to want to stick around.
These boys are my heroes. They come every week to spend time with my children.
At Robert Morse University, every student is expected to reach out to others.
They can teach them something no one else can.
Wisconsin.
They're role models to the children, and homework comes way before sports. Their grades have improved, and their lives are just a bit richer.
Okay.
What they do for my kids is truly wonderful.
Change someone's life. It changes yours forever. Robert Morse University.
I call them my lifeline.
Interesting, of course. I am here with Romo. How are you doing today, Romo? Great. All right, so Romo, just a few questions. How do you think the game is going right now for the Colonials? All right, on top of that, what do you think about the play of Paul Jones and his defense just demolishing Morgan State right now? All right, well, you heard it here first. Romo with his insight to the game. Back to you guys.
Be sure to tune in to Colonial Sports Center every Thursday, 9:30 p.m. on RMU-CentralMedia.com and Channel 98 around the Moon Township area.
Welcome back to Politically Incorrect on RMU-TV. This is a brand new segment on our show called A Tad Too Tight, where we talk about uncomfortable topics in an uncomfortable position. Now, we just talked about inequality that affects women and people of color every single day. And we've established that these disparities are absolutely detrimental to the United States as a whole. It's a problem that needs to be fixed, so we're dedicating this entire segment of A Tad Too Tight to look over the candidates and determine what each of their views are on this important issue. And to help me, as always, the very informed Sam Predabon. Sam, thanks for being on the show again. Pleasure. Let's start with the person who takes up the most media time. We're going to do him first, Donald Trump. What does Donald Trump say about inequality when it comes to people of color and to women?
Well, Donald Trump, as far as we go for people of color, doesn't really bring up a topic to come out and say it. Not a lot of the Republican candidates do. For some reason, in fact, all of the Republican candidates avoid racial topics. Maybe because they are either A, uncomfortable with bringing them up, or B, they're still a little bit racist. We don't know.
Right.
Trump, however, does feel strongly for women. He says that he, let me check my notes here, supports equal pay as a concept, but he hasn't actually said anything. He feels strongly about women's health, equal pay, and women in general. He also, when a woman asked him if he was pro-choice or pro-life, as it is her body she wanted to make the choices of, he says he's pro-life. He said to her, "You're going to make the same if you do as good as a job as a man, and I happen to be pro-life."
All right, so Donald Trump is, for all intents and purposes, pro-women.
Yes.
But he doesn't actually have a plan to address that. And that is the biggest problem. We have all these politicians today saying, I'm all for equal pay. And we're going to talk about a few more politicians here in a minute that are running for president. They say, we're all for equal pay. We're all for equal rights for people of all gender. But when it comes down to it, they don't have a plan and they don't have a way to address that. Now, moving on to the next person, we're going to talk about Ted Cruz. He's another Republican running for president, and much like Donald Trump, if you visit Ted Cruz's website, you are not going to find an option to read about his views on race or gender.
It's true. Like the other Republican candidates, he avoids it for some reason. We're not entirely sure why. He says that the equal pay for equal work has been in law for decades. He's very much out of the loop.
Absolutely. That's a direct quote from him, too. He said, equal pay has been in the laws for decades, which is not 100% true. It's true that this idea of equal pay for women has been around, but there is no law for equal pay.
Absolutely.
Some laws have been proposed for equal pay. He has voted to turn down those laws. He has voted against them.
What's even more uncomfortable is he claims Obama has incited a race war.
Yes, when it comes to race, Ted Cruz is, well, not to mix words, Ted Cruz is not very popular amongst black voters. But his only thing he's ever said about race or anything like that is he said that Obama being president has created anger amongst the black communities, which I think it's not true at all. It's absolutely not true.
Absolutely
and
not.
it's insane. It's another one of Ted Cruz's insane
It's
ramblings.
extremely uncomfortable to just hear him talk about this.
Absolutely. Now, Marco Rubio is our third and final presidential candidate, legitimate presidential candidate, still running for the Republican nomination. What are his views? Because he is seen as sort of a liberal candidate in some ways. At least he was for the past few months. He's becoming more conservative, but he's considered a liberal candidate on these issues.
Strangely enough, he doesn't talk about unequal income. He harps on about unequal opportunity, saying that because there is an equal opportunity, that is to say that men and women, black and whites, do not have the same opportunities to go where the white man would go, that they're going to come up short and have unequal pay. That's saying that there is equal pay in this country in the first place. There isn't.
Right.
You offer pay to the same position, chances are the white man's going to get hired because of racial or gender inequalities.
Absolutely. And one of the things Marco Rubio has said over and over again is that higher education is the key to solving this issue. But as we just talked about, the income disparity for women still exists, 21% difference. And as I said at the end of the show, or end of the last segment, women have a higher chance of having a degree than men do. So it's not just an issue of education. Education does help, and it does help things in racial situations, but it's not the only answer.
He definitely has a point in saying that there needs to be higher education. That's absolutely a fact.
Sure.
The primary and secondary education of this country has been lacking and has been falling farther and farther behind. So he is right in saying that, but that definitely is not going to cover the problems. There's still other problems. Like you said, women are getting their masters more, they're graduating, and yet they're still not being paid proper.
Correct. And then also, just like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio has voted against the Equal Pay Act not once, but twice. Not amazing. Moving on to the Democrats, Bernie Sanders, all right? Now, as you would expect, the Democrats are a little more liberal on issues of race and gender than the Republicans are. But one thing that is very notable about both of the candidates, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, we'll get to Hillary Clinton in a minute, they both have race as an issue on their website. If you go to the website, click issues, race and gender are on both of their websites. Now, for Bernie Sanders, his solutions include increasing the minimum wage, saying a lot of these issues, it's not just an issue of women not being paid enough, it's that nobody is being paid enough, really. He wants to invest to get Americans working again, this whole idea that lower socioeconomic backgrounds lead to bigger disparities, which is true. He also, when you click on the race section of his website, it takes you to this whole page on how addressing violence is his big thing. Political violence, racial violence, gun violence, those are all his things. And unlike the Republican counterparts, he did vote for that income, or for the Pay Equality Act for women.
Yeah, Bernie brings up a lot of excellent points. The only thing that could maybe hinder him in this race is that he wants to increase the minimum wage. That has economic effects. at face value, everyone's gonna, think, yeah, I want to increase in minimum wage. That means a minimum wage job I can survive on, which is good, but it could also have negative economic effects. He also, however, demands that corporations pay their fair share in taxes.
Yeah, one of Bernie's big things is this idea of paying your fair share, but another problem to that plan, it sounds nice in that one sentence, but he doesn't actually have a plan. He has more of a plan than, say, some of the Republicans do, especially when it comes to these things of race and gender, but his solution of making companies pay their fair share, and that is what will figure out this race and gender issue in time, I don't really buy into too much. I don't think that just simply raising minimum wage or simply taxing corporations is going to be enough to fix race and gender.
And that's the problem with Bernie Sanders. He says things sort of like Donald Trump that sound good at face value, but when you get really into it, he doesn't actually have a plan.
Sure. Now, moving on to our last candidate, we have Hillary Clinton. Now, as you might expect, Hillary Clinton, the only woman in the race still, now that Carly Fiorina has dropped out, she is the biggest proponent for women and black people in our country. She wants to end the era of incarceration, this whole idea of school to prison pipeline. She wants to end that. She wants to defend every American's right to vote. That's at the top of her page. If you click on issues, you go to race, the first thing it's going to tell you is defend every American's right to vote. I don't know what that means.
That implies that Americans currently, not every American has the right to vote.
There are some theories and ideas that say that people of lower socioeconomic backgrounds don't vote as much. Therefore, they're not as well represented as they should be. I think that's what she's talking about, but I don't know why she's listing that as her first thing.
That doesn't necessarily mean to defend. That's just the citizens themselves and exercising their own right.
Right, and then it goes on to say ending gun violence will help. I think gun violence could be a part of it, but it's back to this Bernie Sanders thing. His solution was end violence. I don't know where violence is really coming from too much in this race. And then close the achievement gap. She doesn't really explain what the achievement gap is, but it has something to do with, it seems like, this idea that women and people of color are not treated the same as white people are. But there's not too much description. Hillary Clinton, in many ways, is a vote for women. That's what she's trying to sell herself as. She's actually not that popular amongst women voters, surprisingly enough, though. But she's very popular amongst minority voters. So this is really central to her campaign. You would expect her to do this. Now, of all the people we've researched, Sam, who would you say had the most information about this stuff that we could find?
In my opinion, surprisingly enough, it was Bernie Sanders.
As
soon as I Googled what I had to find out about him, immediately I was taken right to his website, and it was all laid out. There were graphs, there were statistics, the paragraphs were easy to read, and the information was right there, right when you needed it.
I would have to agree with that statement. The worst, though, I'm giving that to Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz had almost nothing on this, which is surprising. If you can be worse than Donald Trump at something, that's embarrassing. Ted Cruz did it today. Sam, thank you so much for being on the show. I always appreciate talking to you, my friend. Now, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to have our final thoughts and an update from last week's Republican debate. You're not going to want to miss it. Stay tuned.
These boys are my heroes. They come every week to spend time with my children.
At Robert Morris University, every student is expected to reach out to others.
They can teach them something no one else can.
Wisconsin.
They're role models to the children, and homework comes way before sports. Their grades have improved, and their lives are just a bit richer.
Okay.
What they do for my kids is truly wonderful.
Change someone's life. It changes yours forever. Robert Morris University.
I call them my lifeline.
People don't realize how quickly you can end up on the street. One thing happens in your life, medical bills you can't pay, you lose your job, and that's it.
At Robert Morse University, every student is expected to reach out to others.
We went to DC to work with the homeless. They sell a newspaper called Street Sense. Thought I'd help.
But if you want to give more, you can.
This person came up to me and said, get a job. And for 2 hours, I felt what it was like to be homeless.
Good morning. $1 help.
Some of the other students said, how can we change this? And I said, sometimes you can't change the world, but you may be able to change one person's world. My dream? Open a psych clinic for people on the street.
Change someone's life. It changes yours forever. Robert Morse University.
Thank you all so much for tuning into Politically Incorrect this week. You know, we covered a pretty heavy topic today. The inequalities that affect women and minorities in this nation, it's not an easy thing to talk about. It can be uncomfortable listening to the statistics and knowing that these things are taking place in our country right now. It's absolutely heartbreaking. Inequality by no means is a fun topic, but it is one that we cannot ignore any longer. As we look forward to this upcoming election and even farther into our country's future, we need to make the promise to ourselves and to others that these injustices that have been taking place in our country for the past 300 years will not be tolerated any longer. It's not going to be enough to just acknowledge these issues anymore. From here on out, we need to commit ourselves to taking action and demanding action and trying to solve these problems once and for all. Now, as always, we're going to be back in just 2 weeks with another episode of Politically Incorrect with another topic you may not want to hear about, but you need to hear about. I've been your host, Eddie Shee, but before we leave, let's take a look at how the most recent Republican debate went.
You've been funding liberal Democratic politicians, and by the way,
I funded you.
The
I
reason
funded him.
You're welcome to have the check back.
I funded this guy.
Because let's
I
be
gave
clear.
him a check.
Yeah, you gave me
him a check.
$5,000.
You never funded me.
And by the way, let's be clear. Donald claims to care
You know why? I didn't
about
want to, but he sent me his book with his autograph.
Donald, I understand rules
Mr.
are very
Trump,
hard
you're
for you.
doing
They're
a great
very
job.
confusing.
I have his book.
Okay,
Yeah, on your reality
Trump,
TV
you're doing a
show,
great
not
job.
in
Thank you.
Donald.
Thank you for the book.
Donald.
Thank you for the book. Go ahead.
Donald, you can get back on
We
your
had a lot
meds
of
now.
fun up here tonight, I have to tell you. Thank you for the book. I really appreciate it.
Donald, relax.
Go ahead. I'm relaxed. You're the
sent him a
basket
book.
case. Go ahead. Go
Donald.
ahead. Don't get nervous.
My,
Go ahead.
My
I
name
promise
is,
you,
my
Donald,
name is
there's
Mitch.
nothing about
I've
you
seen
that makes
I've
anyone
seen-
nervous.
You're losing
people
so
are actually
badly.
watching this at
You don't
home.
know
Okay.
what's happening. Gentlemen.